Something just happened involving Zak Bagans, and it's not another haunted museum stunt or television rumor. Moments ago, shocking news broke, and it's leaving fans of ghost adventures in disbelief. What he admitted in a recent statement has turned years of speculation into something much darker. This story digs into the strange coincidences surrounding his recent behavior, the troubling silence from his crew, and what insiders claim he's finally confessing to. Stay until the end, because the truth about what's happening to Zach is far more disturbing than anyone expected. Subscribe now. You're going to need context for what's coming. It started with a single post. No video, no promotion, just a chilling message dropped on Zach Baggins' official account a little after midnight. The truth always finds its way through the dark, it read. Within minutes, it was shared thousands of times. Fans who had followed ghost adventures for over a decade flooded the comments, some asking if it was a teaser for a new episode, others begging to know if Zach was okay. But the words that followed in a now-deleted story made it clear this wasn't marketing. It was a confession. "I've been holding something back for years," he wrote, "something that should have stayed buried. Now it's forcing its way out." That was the moment everything changed. In the hours after that post, his name dominated social media. Major entertainment pages picked it up, and paranormal forums lit up with panic. Was Zach talking about an old investigation? A personal secret? Or worse, something supernatural he had encountered that never made it to air? For the first time in years, Zach's tone didn't sound like a man promoting the paranormal. It sounded like a man haunted by it. Witnesses close to him claim he had been acting strangely for weeks, canceling appearances, shutting down museum tours, and avoiding phone calls. Some said his voice, even in casual interviews, carried a kind of trembling edge, as if he was being watched, or worse, followed by something unseen. The post stayed up for just 22 minutes before disappearing entirely. But by then, screenshots had spread across Reddit, TikTok, and every corner of the ghost hunting community. A few noticed something odd. In the image attached to the post, a shadow lingered behind Zach's shoulder, a distorted shape almost human, yet not. People debated whether it was an illusion, an editing glitch, or something else entirely. Then silent. No follow-up, no denial, no clarification. That's when the whispers started. Former crew members refused to comment. His museum staff claimed technical reasons for the closures, and those who had recently spoken to Zach said he seemed distant, paranoid, almost scared. Whatever was going on, it wasn't just another episode or a viral stunt. Something real was unraveling, and whatever truth he hinted at was finally coming for him. Long before the midnight post sent shockwaves through the paranormal world, Zak Bagans had already cemented himself as the face of modern ghost hunting. Ghost Adventures began in 2008 as a low-budget documentary with shaky cameras and real fear. But what set Zach apart wasn't just the hauntings, it was his conviction. He didn't act like a TV host chasing ratings. He behaved like a man obsessed with the unseen. His voice would tremble as he shouted into the darkness, daring whatever was inside to show itself. Viewers could feel it. That raw energy turned him into a global phenomenon. Within a few short years, he went from filming abandoned prisons to owning one of the most infamous collections of cursed artifacts on Earth, the Haunted Museum in Las Vegas. At its peak, Ghost Adventures pulled millions of viewers per episode. Zach's team, Aaron Goodwin, Billy Tolley, and Jay Wasley, became household names in the paranormal community. Together, they traveled the country, confronting entities that most people only whisper about. But behind the success, there was a cost. Zach's obsession with authenticity blurred the line between performance and possession. He started experimenting with darker locations, hospitals where patients died screaming, homes tied to demonic rituals, and prisons where despair had soaked into the concrete. Crew members have since admitted that filming these episodes wasn't just exhausting, it was dangerous. Equipment would break, voices would whisper through static, and sometimes Zach would refuse to leave even after everyone else packed up, standing alone in total darkness, murmuring to something that wasn't there. The fame amplified his isolation. Fans saw the confident host on screen, but insiders saw the toll. Zach stopped doing meet and greets. He avoided avoided daylight interviews. His once loud personality turned quieter, almost solemn. Some said he'd spend hours walking through the museum alone, staring at objects like the Dybbuk box or the Bela Lugosi mirror, as if they were speaking to him. Even close friends said he'd begun treating the artifacts like people. It wasn't long before rumors spread that something had followed him home, but Zach dismissed it, insisting it was all part of the work. Yet, as Ghost Adventures evolved, so did its darkness. Episodes began feeling less like entertainment and more like confessions. Zach wasn't just documenting hauntings anymore. He was living inside one. The man who once hunted ghosts was now being haunted himself, and whether he realized it or not, the cracks were beginning to show. When the cameras stopped rolling and the lights faded, something inside Ghost Adventures began to shift. The chemistry that once made the team feel like brothers on a mission turned into something colder, more secretive. Fans noticed it first. The laughter between scenes vanished, the energy dulled, and moments of visible tension started creeping into the episodes. Aaron Goodwin, who had always been the heart of the show, began looking uncomfortable, hesitant to follow Zach into certain rooms. Viewers took to forums, pointing out how Aaron's body language had changed. In one viral clip, Zach called out to him from a dark hallway, and instead of replying with his usual nervous humor, Aaron's voice cracked as he whispered, "I don't want to go back in there again." That moment, fans say, marked the beginning of the silence. Within a year, behind-the-scenes updates stopped. Interviews were canceled. Crew members who had been with Zach for over a decade suddenly disappeared from the credits with no explanation. Billy Tolley and Jay Wasley rarely spoke publicly about filming anymore. When they did, their words felt cautious, measured. One interview from 2023 stands out. When asked about Zach's leadership, Jay paused, smiled uncomfortably, and said, "Zach's very passionate about his work. Sometimes that passion takes him to places we can't really follow." Rumors spread that an incident occurred during one of their museum lockdowns, something so disturbing that the network forced them to destroy the footage. A former production assistant anonymously claimed, "There's one night nobody's allowed to talk about. We were told to erase everything, even backups." Others whispered that Zach had started performing private rituals before filming, saying it was to keep the energy focused. But after that night, everything about the crew's dynamic changed. Social media became another red flag. Aaron stopped tagging Zach in posts. Billy unfollowed the museum account entirely. When asked why, he simply replied, "We're all on different paths now." Even loyal fans began to sense something bigger was being covered up, something that wasn't just creative differences or burnout. It felt like a secret pact had been made. Those who knew what happened behind closed doors weren't allowed to speak, and those who didn't were too afraid to ask. In the paranormal world, silence is often louder than any scream, and in the case of Zak Bagans' crew, that silence became deafening. A quiet confirmation that whatever haunted them wasn't just inside the locations, it was inside the people who went looking for it. For years, the Haunted Museum was Zak Bagans' crowning achievement, a Gothic mansion filled with cursed artifacts that blurred the line between history and horror. It wasn't just a tourist attraction, it was Zak's personal obsession, a physical manifestation of everything he had hunted for decades. The building itself, a 1930s mansion near downtown Las Vegas, was rumored to already be haunted before Zach ever set foot inside. Locals used to call it the Vengert House, and even before Zach bought it, neighbors complained of strange lights flickering in the attic, phantom footsteps, and whispers through open windows on windless nights. To Zach, that made it perfect. When the museum opened in 2017, it drew immediate crowds, but it also drew something else. Guests would faint, cameras would shut off. Some visitors reported violent nausea and migraines after viewing specific room. One woman claimed she was scratched on her back after touching a chair that supposedly came from a serial killer's home. Zach showcased objects like the Dybbuk box, said to contain a malevolent Jewish spirit, Peggy the doll, who allegedly causes heart attacks in those who disrespect her, and the Bela Lugosi mirror, rumored to show demonic faces to those who stare too long. But the deeper one explored the museum, the more unsettling it became. Every hallway seemed to hold its own curse. Tour guides whispered that certain rooms were locked not for display, but for containment. Even the staff started reporting things they couldn't explain. Security footage captured shadows moving when no one was inside. Alarm systems would trigger in sealed rooms. Visitors left crying, saying they felt something following them out. Zach himself once admitted in an interview that there were rooms even I don't like to walk into anymore. It wasn't bravado, it was dread. After one particularly strange night, he claimed that every electrical circuit in the building blew out simultaneously at 3:03 a.m., followed by the sound of knocking coming from beneath the basement floor. Then came the accidents. A tour guide collapsed while walking guests through the basement, her heart racing uncontrollably. A camera operator reportedly quit mid-shift after claiming he saw Zach's reflection blink independently in a mirror. By 2024, rumors circulated that parts of the museum had been quietly sealed off, including a private research room only Zach could enter. Employees began quitting without notice, saying the energy inside had grown unbearable. It was this very museum that fans began to suspect was at the center of Zach's mysterious midnight confession. Because if what he hinted at was true, if something from within those walls had attached itself to him, then the haunted museum wasn't just cursed by its objects, it was cursed by the man who built it, and whatever he awakened inside those rooms might have finally followed him home. By the time Ghost Adventures reached its 15th year, fans thought they'd seen it all: possessions, poltergeists, full-bodied apparitions caught on film. But what they didn't see were the things that happened when the cameras weren't rolling. Crew members began to talk, quietly and off the record, about nights that were never meant to make it to air. It wasn't just eerie noises or malfunctioning gear anymore. It was the feeling that something had learned their patterns, that the darkness they were documenting was starting to anticipate them. One former sound technician described it perfectly. "It's like the show became self-aware, like it knew when we were there." Production logs from several episodes revealed unexplained gaps, entire hours of footage missing or corrupted. Equipment would power on by itself, battery packs drained within minutes, and audio recorders picked up whispers saying the crew's names long before they spoke. In one case, an entire SD card melted inside the camera while filming at a Nevada asylum. Zach called it the energy feeding off us. To others, it looked like a warning. There was one incident, though, that stood out, something the network allegedly buried. During a lockdown at the museum, cameras captured what appeared to be Zach collapsing after staring into the Bela Lugosi mirror. The footage was never broadcast. Insiders claim he was unresponsive for nearly 15 minutes, whispering fragments of sentences when he finally came to, "It's not done. It's still here." From that day forward, people close to him said his demeanor changed. He became withdrawn, jumpier, as if every sound was amplified. Another episode filmed at a rural church in Louisiana was quietly shelved, even though it was nearly complete. One crew member said Zach demanded all footage be destroyed after something attached to the van during their drive home. He reportedly ordered the team to cleanse every piece of equipment with holy water before entering the next location. That same crew member quit 2 days later, refusing to give interviews. Then came the emails. Internal messages leaked months later, suggesting the production had implemented new safety protocols. Every shoot began with a spiritual protection briefing, something unheard of in reality television. Zach's tone during these meetings grew darker. He started warning the crew to treat every location like a living thing. He insisted certain places had consciousness, that the entities were no longer waiting to be found. What haunted Zach Baggins wasn't just ghosts anymore. It was the realization that whatever he had been chasing for entertainment had started chasing him back. And as strange accidents multiplied, crew members falling ill, gear breaking, staff quitting mid-season, one thing became terrifyingly clear. The hauntings were no longer confined to the screen. They had followed ghost adventures home. After years of chasing the dead, Zak Bagans began to vanish from the living. It started subtly, a missed convention appearance here, a cancelled museum event there. Then, by early 2025, fans noticed something impossible to ignore. Zak had completely withdrawn from public life. No new Ghost Adventures teasers, no interviews. Even his once active social media fell silent, save for a few cryptic posts that hinted at exhaustion and regret. One simply read, "You can't film what won't let go." At first, fans chalked it up to burnout. After all, the man had spent nearly 2 decades confronting darkness in abandoned hospitals, prisons, and cursed homes. But the timing felt strange. His team stopped mentioning him altogether. The Travel Channel quietly removed promotional material for upcoming museum specials, and his official website went dark for maintenance, a maintenance that never ended. A source close to the production told a podcast, "Something happened last year, something that scared even him." Rumors began to spiral. Some claimed Zak had been hospitalized after a breakdown. Others insisted he was conducting private cleansing rituals inside the museum. Then came whispers of lost footage, hours of unaired material filmed during a late-night lockdown that the network refused to release. A supposed leak described a ritual gone wrong, an attempt to communicate with whatever spirit haunted one of the museum's sealed rooms. The account claimed Zak collapsed mid-ritual, screaming words in a language no one recognized before blacking out. When he awoke, he allegedly begged the crew to destroy every frame. Days later, production was halted indefinitely. That was the moment everything began to crumble. The museum shut down temporarily, citing structural inspection. In reality, employees said Zak demanded every object be spiritually contained. He refused to sleep inside the mansion, moving instead to an undisclosed property outside Las Vegas. Even from there, witnesses claimed he kept blackout curtains drawn at all hours and slept with lights on. His neighbors described seeing strange visitors, priests, mediums, and one man who claimed to be a psychic archivist, coming and going at odd hours. For the first time, it seemed like Zach Bagans, the fearless ghost hunter, was terrified. The man who once taunted demons now refused to speak their names. A friend later admitted, "He told me he finally understood that some things don't haunt places, they haunt people." That confession spread quietly online, buried beneath speculation and denial. But to those who'd followed Zak's journey from the start, it made perfect sense. His empire wasn't collapsing from fame or fatigue. It was collapsing from within. The silence, the shutdowns, the missing footage, all of it pointed to one horrifying truth. Whatever Zak had been searching for all these years, he had finally found it. And now, it wouldn't let him go. Then came the night that changed everything. Without warning, Zak Bagans resurfaced, pale, exhausted, and visibly shaken, in a late-night live stream that lasted barely 10 minutes before vanishing from every platform. The clip spread fast, but only fragments remain online. In it, Zak sat alone in a dimly lit room, curtains drawn, a single candle flickering beside him. His voice trembled as he spoke. "I built my life around chasing what others ran from, but when you stare into that darkness long enough, it follows you home." For the first time, fans weren't seeing the confident showman who mocked the unseen. They were seeing a man broken by it. He confessed that after one specific museum lockdown in 2022, something had changed. He said an object, though he refused to name it, had chosen him. "It's not just in the museum anymore," he whispered. "It's here, in me." At first, viewers assumed it was performance art, another paranormal promo. But the fear in his eyes said otherwise. His hands trembled, his speech stuttered. Behind him, a faint knocking sound interrupted his words 3 times in perfect rhythm. He froze. Then the stream abruptly cut off. Moments later, his accounts went offline. For days, theories exploded. Some said it was a nervous breakdown. Others swore it was possession. But an alleged insider from his team leaked what Zach had told them hours before going live, that he could hear something whispering his name at night. He believed it was the same voice recorded during the Dybbuk box investigation years earlier. The revelation was chilling. Zach admitted he never fully sealed the box. He had performed a partial closure ritual for television, but left the object open afterward, convinced the world needed to see the danger firsthand. He told friends that decision had cursed him. "I gave it an audience," he allegedly said. "Now it wants the spotlight back." His confession reframed everything: the crew's disappearance, the museum closures, the panic in his final post. It wasn't just guilt, it was fear of something still active, still aware. Those who managed to rewatch the fragment of his live stream noticed something horrifying in the reflection behind him: a tall, blackened silhouette standing perfectly still until the screen went black. Whether it was coincidence, lighting, or something else, no one could say. But one thing was certain: Zach's revelation wasn't about fame, regret, or exhaustion anymore. It was a warning. Whatever haunted ghost adventures had finally revealed itself, and it had chosen to speak through him. The moment Zach Bagans' live stream vanished, the paranormal world exploded. Former investigators, skeptics, and fans flooded the internet with theories. Some swore he was possessed. Others said it was a staged breakdown, but those who'd worked with Zach said otherwise. That wasn't acting, one insider claimed. Networks scrambled for answers, yet no one from his team spoke a word. Even the Travel Channel issued a vague statement wishing him peace and recovery, avoiding every real question. Analysts tried to debunk the clip, saying the knocking was edited or the shadow behind him was just lighting, but viewers weren't convinced. "He looked terrified," one fan said, "like something was in the room with him." As rumors of sealed museum chambers and late-night rituals resurfaced, the story twisted darker. Whether it was a hoax or something real, one truth echoed across every forum: Zach Bagans wasn't performing anymore. He was living the horror he used to film. Aaron Goodwin has spent over 15 years chasing ghosts, demons, and the unknown beside Zach Bagans. But what fans never knew is that something has been chasing him back. From the early days of Ghost Adventures, Aaron claimed something followed him home, and after all this time, it hasn't left. He's tried moving houses, spiritual cleansings, and even exorcisms. Nothing worked. Now, for the first time, Aaron admits that the haunting never stopped. And the reason why will leave you speechless. Make sure you're subscribed, because the truth Aaron just revealed is darker than anyone expected. When Ghost Adventures premiered in 2008, viewers instantly connected with Aaron Goodwin. He was the comic relief, the one who lightened the tension when things got too dark. But behind that nervous laughter was a man who was genuinely terrified of what he was experiencing. Unlike Zak Bagans, who thrived on confrontation, Aaron was the one sent alone into the shadows. It became a running theme of the show: Aaron, the bait. Fans thought it was funny at first, but for Aaron, those solo moments left scars that never healed. The first time he said something attached to him was during the now infamous investigation at Bobby Mackey's Music World in Kentucky, a location the crew would revisit multiple times over the years. That night, Aaron felt something touch his back, cold and deliberate. He froze, unable to speak, as Zach and Nick watched his reaction through night vision. "It felt like electricity," Aaron said later, "but alive." Afterward, his personality seemed to shift. He became quieter, more cautious. When the team wrapped filming, Aaron started noticing strange things at home. The air would turn icy for no reason, and shadows crossed the walls when no one else was around. He'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced someone was standing in the corner. Zach teased him about it on camera, calling him paranoid, but privately, he admitted that something was different. "It's like something stuck to him that night," Zach once said. Even in the early seasons, there were moments fans never saw. Crew members claimed Aaron refused to enter certain rooms, saying he could feel something breathing. Others recalled him breaking down during sound checks, muttering, "It followed me again." That was the beginning of a 15-year nightmare. What started as an unexplained chill in a haunted bar grew into a presence that wouldn't let go. Something that followed Aaron from hotel rooms to his own home and eventually into every episode they filmed. As one producer later said, he wasn't just hunting ghosts anymore, he'd become one of their favorite targets. The night everything changed for Aaron Goodwin took place in Goldfield, Nevada, inside a decaying hotel where the crew had been filming late into the night. The Goldfield Hotel was already legendary among paranormal investigators, rumored to house violent entities. But for Aaron, what happened there went beyond any haunting the crew had ever encountered. It started simple. Zach and Nick were filming in the upper floors, while Aaron was sent alone to cover the basement corridor. He carried only a camera and a digital recorder, his breath visible in the cold air. "If anyone's down here, show yourself," he said, half joking, his voice echoing off the walls. Moments later, the camera jolted violently. In the raw footage, which only a handful of editors have seen uncut, a dark shape moved behind him fast, like a living shadow. The feed cut out for 6 seconds. When it came back, Aaron was crying, muttering under his breath, "It touched me." Zach and Nick found him moments later, pale and shaking. When they asked what happened, Aaron just kept saying, "It went through me." That phrase stuck with them for years. He wasn't saying it touched him. He said it passed through him. After that, his energy changed. Zach noticed it immediately. He was quieter. I'd never seen him that way before. He didn't joke, didn't laugh. It was like something drained him. For weeks after Goldfield, Aaron complained of dizziness, blackouts, and constant nightmares. Crew members said he'd wake up screaming in hotel rooms. At first, everyone thought it was exhaustion, the toll of long nights in haunted places. But when Aaron started hearing voices calling his name, even when the cameras were off, he realized something else was happening. In a later interview, he admitted that the Goldfield incident was the moment he knew the attachment was real. "You don't forget that kind of feeling," he said. "It's like something slipped inside and stayed there. I tried to pray it away, tried to ignore it, but it was already part of me." That night in Nevada wasn't just another episode. It marked the start of what Aaron would later describe as a 15-year haunting that followed him through every home, every season, and every investigation that came after. As Ghost Adventures grew from a cult hit into a global phenomenon, Aaron Goodwin's haunting grew with it. Fans saw the edited episodes, the dramatic jumps, the night vision scares, the humor that lightened the fear. But behind the scenes, Aaron's world was unraveling. He wasn't sleeping much. He'd wake up in hotel rooms during filming, unsure where he was, the air freezing around him. At home, lights flickered, objects moved on their own, and his pets refused to enter certain rooms. During one investigation in 2011, Zach noticed something strange about Aaron's energy. "It's like the air around him was heavier," he said. "I could feel it before we even started filming." Cameras often malfunctioned near him. Audio recorders captured deep growls that followed only his voice. Even EVP analysts noticed that Aaron's name appeared more frequently in recordings than anyone else's. In one chilling clip, a whisper clearly said, "He's ours." The sound engineers thought it was interference until they slowed it down and realized it repeated twice. Aaron tried to laugh it off publicly, but privately, he was falling apart. He moved 3 times in 2 years, but each house became active within weeks. "It doesn't matter where I go," he told a fellow investigator. "It finds me." He began burning sage nightly, wearing protection bracelets, and consulting psychics. One told him point blank, "You're not haunted by a place, you're haunted by memory." The crew began to notice his mental strain. Nick Groff once said, "There were times Aaron didn't want to go back inside. He'd look at a building and just shake his head. He'd already been through enough." But Ghost Adventures kept evolving, demanding bigger, darker locations, abandoned hospitals, prisons, asylums, and Aaron, despite everything, kept going. "If I'm already living with it," he said once, "I might as well face it head on." By 2013, the haunting had become part of his identity and part of the show's legacy. He wasn't just Aaron Goodwin, the cameraman, or the comic relief. He was the man something had claimed. The living evidence that when you chase the dead long enough, one might just decide to chase you back. By 2016, the haunting that had once been whispered about in fan circles had taken over Aaron Goodwin's life. Every new season of Ghost Adventures seemed to pull him deeper into darkness. His once upbeat upbeat personality had dimmed, replaced by exhaustion and fear that he could no longer hide. During the filming of Ghost Adventures, Aftershocks, a special episode designed to revisit previous investigations, Aaron finally broke down on camera. His voice trembled as he admitted, "I don't think it ever left me. I think it's part of me now." The crew and fans were stunned. What had once been treated as a running joke, Aaron being the bait, was suddenly horrifyingly real. He spoke of vivid nightmares where unseen hands dragged him toward the same dark hallway from Goldfield. He described black shadows that appeared in mirrors behind him, whispering his name in the same deep growl they'd caught on EVP years earlier. Zach tried to protect him, insisting the show tone down solo investigations, but Aaron refused. "If it's attached to me," he said, "I'm not gonna hide from it. I want to understand it." Still, those close to him noticed the change. He was always cold, always tired. Crew members described lights flickering when he entered a room. One audio technician claimed his equipment failed repeatedly whenever Aaron stood near it, only to work perfectly moments later. Desperate for relief, Aaron turned to spiritual cleansings. He met with priests, mediums, even Native American shamans, but every ritual seemed to provoke the entity instead of banishing it. During one cleansing, a crucifix on the wall reportedly fell and shattered. Another time, a mirror cracked right as the prayer ended. Aaron later said, "It laughs now. Like it knows I can't stop it." That year marked a turning point. The haunting was no longer a mysterious possibility. It was an undeniable part of his existence. And the more he tried to fight it, the more it seemed to feed on his fear. By 2017, the haunting had evolved from strange occurrences into something darker and much harder to explain. Editors and production staff began whispering about footage that never made it to air. In the cutting rooms, files labeled Aaron_cam restricted circulated briefly before being locked away under archival only. One assistant editor later described watching raw footage of Aaron during a solo lockdown in an undisclosed location. He wasn't himself. It was like someone else was controlling his movements. In the video, Aaron stands perfectly still for nearly 4 minutes, eyes open but unfocused. Then, suddenly, he whispers something, but when the sound team enhanced the audio, they realized it was a second, deeper voice speaking underneath his own. The EVP captured what engineers described as a growl forming words they couldn't decipher. When they played it back for him, Aaron reportedly walked out of the studio without saying a word. That file was never shown again. There were other incidents too. During an overnight review, a camera operator noticed something strange in Aaron's reflection, a shadow that appeared behind him but wasn't present in the room. It moved when he didn't. When the footage was slowed down frame by frame, the reflection's head turned toward the lens, but Aaron's didn't. Editors called it distorted overlay, but no one could replicate the effect. That same year, producers made an unusual decision. Certain recordings featuring Aaron would no longer be aired without executive approval. Publicly, they claimed it was to maintain focus on the investigations, but insiders knew better. They were worried, one crew member said. Something in those tapes didn't behave like it was supposed to. When asked later about the restricted footage, Aaron refused to go into detail. He only said, "There are moments that shouldn't have been filmed. When you start recording things that don't belong on this side of reality, you stop being an investigator and start being a doorway." From that point forward, Ghost Adventures would never show unfiltered Aaron footage again. What once made him the heart of the series, his genuine reactions and vulnerability, had become too disturbing for television, and the files that proved why were buried deep, locked away where only a handful of people ever saw what really stood behind him that night. As the years went on, the haunting took its toll not just on Aaron's spirit, but on his mind and body. Those close to him said he stopped sleeping for more than a few hours at a time. He would show up to shoots pale, shaking, and unfocused, sometimes staring into empty corners for long stretches. During interviews, his voice wavered when he spoke about faith, about light, about the possibility of peace. "I used to laugh everything off," he told a podcast in 2018. "Now I just feel like I'm trying to survive every day." Friends noticed his personality fading. The humor that once defined him was gone. Zach and the crew tried to pull him back, but the change was deep. "He wasn't scared anymore," Zach said once. "He was numb, and that scared me more than anything." The more Aaron opened up about his experiences, the worse they seemed to get. Psychics warned him that speaking its name or describing its behavior might be feeding the attachment, giving it energy, acknowledgement, power. But silence only made him feel more trapped. He began keeping journals full of scribbled prayers and drawings of symbols he said came to him in dreams. His handwriting was shaky, frantic. He described seeing his reflection blink when he hadn't. Doors in his home opened by themselves, sometimes in broad daylight. A neighbor later claimed to have seen a figure standing in Aaron's window long after he'd left for filming. When asked about it, Aaron said simply, "That's not me." Relationships crumbled under the pressure. He grew isolated, avoiding people, convinced that anyone close to him could be affected. "I can't bring this around anyone," he said. "It doesn't like that." Those who'd known him since the beginning said he'd become hollow, still kind, still gentle, but carrying an invisible weight. "He's haunted," one crew member whispered during an off-camera break, not by a place, but by his own story. At conventions, fans still saw him smile for photos, laugh, and thank them for watching. But when the lights dimmed and the crowds thinned, Aaron often sat quietly, staring at the floor. "It doesn't want me to stop," he once said to a friend. "It wants to finish what it started." By that point, the haunting wasn't just something following Aaron. It had become part of who he was. And deep down, he was starting to believe that it always would be. By 2022, the haunting had returned in full force. Aaron Goodwin had been through hundreds of investigations by then, but nothing compared to the energy that came flooding back while filming Ghost Adventures, House Calls. On camera, he looked older, heavier with fatigue, but it wasn't just age, it was weight he couldn't shake. He later said the smell came first, that same rotten sulfuric scent he remembered from Bobby Mackey's Music World nearly 15 years earlier. "That smell," he said quietly in a live stream, "that's how I know it's back." Crew members noticed him acting strange during shoots. His voice dropped unexpectedly in tone, and he'd stop mid-sentence to stare at nothing. During one investigation in Arizona, his camera battery drained in seconds, but only his. A production assistant claimed Aaron whispered something during that moment, though no one could make out the words. When they replayed the audio, his voice overlapped with another deeper one, speaking the same phrase an instant later. Zach urged him to take time off, fearing for his health, but Aaron refused. "If I run from it," he said, "it wins." He had started wearing a small protective pendant around his neck, something blessed by a priest in Las Vegas. Still, he admitted it didn't help much. "It's smarter now," he told an interviewer. "It hides when other people are around. It waits until I'm alone." After one particular shoot in Oklahoma, Aaron told the crew he felt something grab his arm hard enough to leave bruises shaped like fingers. No one else saw it happen, but he showed the marks during a fan event days later. He laughed it off, saying it was just part of the job, but those who knew him could tell he wasn't joking. He later confessed to a fellow investigator that he'd stopped sleeping in complete darkness. "I can feel it when it's near," he said. "The air gets thick, and it's like it wants me to remember." He described hearing footsteps pacing outside his bedroom window, even when security cameras showed nothing. After all the years, all the evidence, and all the spiritual cleansings, the thing that first found him in a Kentucky nightclub hadn't gone anywhere. It had just learned to wait, and now it was walking beside him again, quiet, patient, and unrelenting. In early 2024, Aaron Goodwin sat in front of his phone camera for what fans thought would be a routine live stream, a Q&A about new Ghost Adventures episodes. But what started as small talk quickly turned into a confession. His tone was quiet, his eyes tired, and his expression unlike anything fans had seen before. "I've learned to live with it," he said after a long pause. "It's not gone. It never left. It's just quieter now." The chat fell silent as he continued. People think I'm exaggerating, but you can't fake 15 years of bad sleep, man. You can't fake what this does to your mind. He said that sometimes it doesn't even try to hide anymore. It just stands in the corners of his room, like it's watching over him, waiting for something. I used to pray it would go away, he whispered, but now I just pray it doesn't get worse. Then, almost as if catching himself, he smiled and said, "Don't worry, guys, I'm used to it." But the laugh that followed was hollow. Viewers noticed something else that night, a faint shadow moving behind Aaron, crossing from left to right. He was sitting alone in his studio, but the movement was unmistakable. Within hours, clips flooded social media. Some said it was a camera glitch. Others claimed to see a figure standing just behind him, half visible in the dim light. The video was deleted less than 24 hours later. Those close to Aaron say that after that live stream, he stopped doing solo appearances entirely. He told one friend that talking about it wakes it up. Another insider claimed he'd had another cleansing done privately, not to remove it, but to contain it. He doesn't want it gone anymore, the friend said. He just wants peace. Aaron hasn't publicly spoken about the live stream since, but in one brief comment under a fan post, he wrote 7 words that sent chills through the community. "It's not haunting me. We coexist now." And with that, the man who'd spent his life hunting spirits confirmed what everyone feared. He'd stopped trying to fight the darkness. He'd learned to live beside it. Today, 15 years after his first encounter, Aaron Goodwin is no longer just a ghost hunter. He's the hunted. Fans still see him smiling in photos, still laughing with Zach and the crew, but the man behind those moments carries something few can understand. Those closest to him describe him as calm but distant, a man who's made peace with a presence that never leaves. He doesn't talk about it much anymore, one crew member said quietly. It's like he's accepted that this is part of who he is now. Aaron has moved houses multiple times, but he no longer does it to escape the entity. "It's not the house," he once said. "It's me." His journals, filled with sketches and symbols, continue to grow. Cryptic entries written at odd hours, as if dictated by something unseen. In one note reportedly found on a film set, he wrote, "It doesn't want to hurt me anymore. It just wants to be remembered." While Ghost Adventures continues to push into new haunted locations, Aaron's story has become its quiet, tragic backbone. He rarely gives interviews now, and when he does, he chooses his words carefully. "I don't think of it as evil anymore," he said during a 2024 fan panel. "I think it's lonely." The audience fell silent. Even Zach, who's built his career on confronting darkness, admits Aaron's case remains unexplained. "We've all seen things," Zach said, "but what follows Aaron, it's personal. It knows him." For Aaron, the haunting is no longer something to escape. It's something he's learned to live with. He doesn't fear the dark anymore because he's been part of it for too long. In one of his last social media posts before deleting his personal accounts, he left a single sentence that fans still quote to this day. "You can't hunt ghosts forever without becoming one." And maybe that's the truest ending to Aaron Goodwin's story. Not a man freed from the haunting, but a man who finally accepted that the line between the living and the dead is far thinner than anyone ever believed. Breaking news is spreading through the paranormal community tonight after Nick Groff, former star and co-creator of Ghost Adventures, has just stepped forward with shocking claims about what really happened behind the scenes of the show, why he vanished from television, and the terrifying encounter that he says changed his life forever. Fans are panicking, networks are scrambling, and insiders are whispering that this may be much darker than anyone expected. Tonight, we expose everything. Lost footage, secret contracts, bans, possession rumors, and a chilling confession Nick says he kept hidden for over a decade. Before we dive in, hit subscribe, because this investigation is only getting started, and the truth coming out now may never be allowed on television again. Long before cameras followed him through dark hallways and abandoned hospitals, Nick Groff was just a quiet kid growing up in a small New England town, the kind of place where streetlights flickered and rumors traveled faster than cars. He wasn't chasing ghosts yet. In fact, Nick's earliest obsession wasn't the paranormal at all. It was film. He loved framing moments, capturing atmosphere, and building tension through lenses. But fate has a way of twisting hobbies into nightmares. Nick lived only a few blocks from a shuttered hospital, a massive, looming structure with smashed windows and peeling paint. Locals whispered it was watching the neighborhood. As a kid, Nick shrugged it off. But as he got older, something strange happened. On late-night walks home, he began hearing what sounded like hospital gurneys rolling through empty rooms. He told himself it was wind until he saw lights flicker across floors where power had been cut for decades. That moment planted a seed. By college, Nick's interest in film morphed into something darker, documenting the unknown. While classmates were obsessing over indie comedies, he was exploring basements, old mill tunnels, forgotten asylums, using only pocket cameras and flashlights. Friends joked he looked more like a ghost hunter than a filmmaker. He would laugh until one night, while reviewing early footage, he caught an unexplained figure standing behind him on tape. That footage has never surfaced publicly, but insiders say Nick keeps it locked away. It was around this time he met Zak Bagans and Aaron Goodwin, two men who felt the same pull toward haunted places. The three of them were different personalities, but the chemistry was undeniable. They filmed a raw, unscripted documentary about a haunted mining town with nothing but borrowed equipment and blind optimism. It was shaky, desperate, wild. And in 2007, a major network called back. Suddenly, Nick's childhood hospital nightmares turned into a career. Nobody understood how real it felt to him. Nobody slept next to the shadows he invited into his life, and nobody realized that Nick wasn't just filming ghosts. He was waking them up. When the pilot of Ghost Adventures aired, nobody expected the explosion that followed. Overnight, the paranormal went from niche curiosity to primetime obsession, and three explorers with handheld cameras became household names. Fans weren't just scared by the entities, they were mesmerized by the investigators themselves. And while Zach brought aggression and Aaron brought humor, viewers quietly gravitated toward Nick. His reactions weren't exaggerated. He didn't shout for dramatic effect. When something rattled him, you could see the fear behind his eyes. It felt real. Travel Channel executives were stunned. Ratings soared. Contracts were signed. Investigations multiplied. Hotels, prisons, hospitals, battlefields. If something had whispered once in 1892, cameras were now rolling. But something else happened. Nick began changing. Crew members noticed it first. Off camera, he grew quieter. He'd stand alone in dark corners of locations after filming had wrapped, staring at places everyone else avoided. During interviews, he spoke in fragmented thoughts, like his mind was still inside haunted hallways long after the camera stopped recording. Fans replayed episodes, pointing out how he would pause before entering certain rooms, as if he already knew something was waiting. Hours of lost sleep, constant travel, inhaling decades of mold, and subjecting his psyche to the world's darkest energy was not in any network handbook, but producers loved it. The more frightened Nick appeared, the better the ratings. The pressure mounted, audience expectations grew, and to maintain the fear factor, cameras started rolling even when investigators weren't ready. Nick was being pushed deeper. Investigations intensified, locations grew more violent, objects flew, doors slammed, and audio tech caught voices that seemed to whisper Nick's name. Then came the most disturbing detail. Multiple episodes captured a shadow following directly behind him, frame by frame. Fans commented, "Why does it always linger near Nick?" Producers ignored it. Meanwhile, Nick's demeanor shifted from curious filmmaker to something else entirely. He looked drained, pale, weighted down. But instead of pulling him back, the network doubled down, booking darker locations, longer lock-ins, and more aggressive experiments. The show was no longer documenting hauntings, it was manufacturing danger, and as the world cheered, Nick quietly realized something chilling. Fame wasn't chasing ghosts. Ghosts were chasing him. The investigation that changed everything began like any other production weekend. The crew drove into a forgotten industrial town in Ohio, where an abandoned textile plant locals called Shadow Mill sat rotting beside a drained riverbed. Chemical runoff stained the concrete. Graffiti artists refused others to go inside. And according to local police logs, the building's night watchman had quit, every single one, after reporting movement in the rafters and breathing in the stairwell. On arrival, Nick felt something immediately. His microphone picked up low humming, even when he stood perfectly still. The air was heavy, like inhaling warm water. The team set up cameras, and as night fell, temperatures dropped unnaturally fast. Jackets frosted. Metal flashlights filmed white with condensation. Then came the smell. Burnt hair and wet iron. Producers were thrilled. Nick wasn't. Halfway through shooting, the crew lost contact with Nick's headset. At first, they assumed interference. It wasn't unusual for old machinery to scramble signals, but when the silence stretched past 3 minutes, then 5, then 10, panic rippled across the team. Cameras cut through black hallways until they found him, standing perfectly still, facing a massive weaving machine from the 1940s, his mouth half open, whispering. His whisper didn't match the lip movements. In the raw audio review, technicians heard a second, deeper voice layered beneath his own. It spoke in a rasping, gasping cadence, like drowning syllables. When Nick snapped out of it, he panicked, asking why everyone looked pale. He had no memory of the missing 14 minutes. They wrapped early. Back at the hotel, equipment refused to turn on, batteries drained, files corrupted. The next morning, the entire audio stream of Nick's disappearance was gone, deleted directly from the master archive. No overwrite, no log, just absence. Editors swore they watched the clip earlier. Now it was vapor. Nick avoided talking about the episode completely. Fans noticed a change. He blinked less, stared longer, spoke slower, like someone trying to listen through walls. One camera operator, who later quit television entirely, told a friend, "When we found him, his shadow was stretched across the floor, but there was nothing behind him to cast it." That operator refuses to step inside abandoned buildings now. Nick left Shadow Mill with something attached, something his contract would never allow him to name. In the seasons that followed Shadow Mill, fans didn't know it yet, but a subtle war was unfolding behind the camera. Editors noticed something disturbing first. Nick's footage started disappearing from the shared server. Entire reaction shots, EVP analyses, and personal interviews were flagged, then quietly removed. When they asked who authorized the cuts, they were told to focus on the leads the network preferred. One editor later confessed that those preferred leads always centered around one personality. Insiders describe a growing tension between Nick and the show's producers. Nick wanted transparency, full access to investigations, raw EVP dumps, unedited evidence. Producers wanted spectacle. Screaming sells better than silence. Possession clips outperform thoughtful analysis. As the show expanded, so did their hunger for dramatic reactions, heightened conflict, and viral moments. Nick didn't play along. At production meetings, he pushed back, arguing against staged confrontations and manufactured drama. Crew members say he became less willing to repeat reactions for coverage. He refused to exaggerate fear. He told producers that the paranormal deserved respect, not performance. That stubborn authenticity, once the foundation of ghost adventures, suddenly became inconvenient. Viewers began noticing something strange. Episodes where Nick physically led investigations placed him in the background during edits. Prolonged infrared shots of him staring into corners, cut. Evidence segments he championed, trimmed down. The quiet, investigative heartbeat he provided was erased frame by frame. Online, whispers spread. Comment sections filled with questions. Why isn't Nick talking as much? Why does Zach narrate everything now? Where's Nick in this episode? Producers offered no explanation. Crew members privately reported something worse. They were told to avoid filming Nick alone, especially when he seemed off. After Shadow Mill, he occasionally froze mid-sentence, turning toward empty hallways like someone had whispered his name. At least 2 sound technicians quit after capturing whispered responses on his mic that didn't match his mouth movements. And quietly, the network shifted marketing materials. Posters centered Zach. Promo clips cut Nick's reactions. Merchandise removed his likeness entirely. As far as the brand was concerned, there was room for only one face. The message was subtle but suffocating. Nick was being edited out of his own legacy. The breaking point didn't happen inside a haunted building. It happened inside a recording booth. During voiceover work for a mid-season episode, witnesses say Nick's voice suddenly cracked mid-sentence. His breathing changed, low and ragged, like he was inhaling smoke. He paused, closed his eyes, and then began whispering, but not in English. His lips barely moved as the sound engineer stared, frozen. The whisper recorded clearly on the monitors, layered, like multiple voices slipping in and out of sync. The room felt cold. Seconds later, Nick collapsed. Crew members rushed him to a hospital under the direction of network representatives. They signed him in under an alias, standard for celebrities. But the doctors had questions. Nick's vocal cords showed severe strain, like he'd been screaming for hours. His cortisol levels were so high the doctor asked if he'd been awake for days. His pupils dilated unevenly. He complained of pressure in his ears, like something's breathing inside the walls. What scared the medical staff most wasn't his symptoms, it was his sleep study. Sensors recorded violent REM spikes and involuntary muscle convulsions. Brainwave patterns resembled trauma victims and patients reporting night terrors. But Nick insisted he'd barely slept all week because of voices tapping the window. The hospital wanted to keep him overnight for observation. The network refused. They signed discharge forms. Nick was back on the road within hours, exhausted, wide-eyed, whispering to himself. Crew say the van ride back to set was silent, except for the sound engineer quietly crying. Something in Nick's voice in that booth had unnerved him so deeply, he resigned 2 weeks later. When the medical reports came back, one note stood out: patient presents physiological symptoms consistent with extreme psychological pressure or parasitic sleep disruption. But there was no official diagnosis attached. Within days, the entire file vanished from the hospital's digital system. The doctor who signed the original report later claimed he had no memory of the visit. Nick requested a short break from filming afterward. Producers denied it. Ratings were surging. The show needed him on camera, even if something unseen was wearing him down. For the first time in his career, Nick stopped smiling on set. He confided to a fellow investigator that the nightmares had changed. The shadow from the textile mill wasn't just staring anymore, it was whispering his real name. When renewal negotiations came around, Nick expected standard paperwork, more episodes, travel budgets, maybe a minor raise. But the contract slid across the table wasn't routine. It was a containment document, pages of tightly worded legal language, clauses underlined in red, and several bizarre restrictions. Lawyers representing the network insisted they were industry standard. Nick had never seen anything like them. First was the non-compete clause. For several years, he would be prohibited from appearing in any paranormal programming, not just ghost shows, any production involving superstition, folklore, or unexplained activity. That alone would kill his career. But deeper within the contract was something stranger, a gag clause barring him from discussing certain locations, including the Shadow Mill investigation. He couldn't speak about lost audio, crew behavior changes, or phenomena resulting in personality alteration. Those exact words appeared 3 times throughout the document. Then came the most chilling section: media likeness ownership. The company would own all footage of Nick Groff's voice, image, and energetic representations. Lawyers refused to define that last phrase. When Nick pressed, they deflected, saying it referred to branding consistency. Crew whispered it meant something else. The network wanted control of Nick's voice recordings, particularly the ones layered with the second whisper. In meetings, producers began speaking differently around him. He noticed nervous glances when he entered rooms. Conversations stopped when he passed. One cameraman admitted the network feared attachment cases, and they didn't want a publicly recognizable investigator associated with it. Negative press? Maybe. Or something deeper. When Nick refused to sign, merchandising deals vanished overnight. His face was removed from promotional images. Social media posts cropped him out. Internally, emails began referring to him as a secondary participant, despite co-founding the show. The brand needs needs a singular leader," a producer told him privately. "Your situation confuses the narrative." By situation, they meant the sleep paralysis, the whispering audio, the shadow following him across episodes. After another legal meeting, Nick walked out shaking. He told a friend, "They don't want clarity, they want control." Days later, word leaked that he was leaving the show. Official statements framed it as voluntary. Internally, crew members said it felt more like an excommunication. The network moved forward as though Nick had never existed. But the clause that bothered him most wasn't the non-compete. It was the line forbidding him from releasing any personal footage recorded in locations where energetic anomalies manifested. They were trying to silence something, and Nick suspected the reason had been whispering to him since Shadow Mill. Of all the investigations whispered about among former crew, one stands out like a bruise: the Rivenhurst Psychiatric Annex in Massachusetts. It was never advertised, never promoted, yet dozens of hours were filmed there. According to production logs, the structure had been condemned for acoustic instability, a vague phrase that locals said meant the building listened. Patients in the 1960s swore hallways echoed voices no one spoke, and nurses refused to work solo shifts because the walls hummed at night. From the first hour, equipment malfunctioned. Digital recorders produced static shaped like breathing. EMF spikes crawled across sensors like moving fingers. Camera operators felt pressure on their backs when no one was behind them. And then there was the ceiling incident. 2 crew members swore they saw a dark shape crawl upside down across the rafters, joints bending at impossible angles. When the camera panned up, nothing was there. Yet their audio captured the sound of nails dragging overhead. During a solo walkthrough, Nick's behavior changed abruptly. Footage shows him entering a patient isolation wing, calmly narrating symptoms recorded there: insomnia, aggression, hallucinations. Mid-sentence, he stops. His eyes widen, and then, barely audible, he begins whispering backwards. Editors later confirmed the audio reversed into perfect English phrases, anxiety-laced commands like "stay," "don't leave me." Moments later, a hallway mirror catches something impossible. Nick's reflection doesn't sync. His body turns left. The reflection lags half a second behind, staring at the camera before catching up. When producers reviewed the clip, a meeting was called immediately. Within 48 hours, filming was halted. Network executives flew in, demanded all raw footage, and ordered editors to scrub any mention of the annex. Crew were told to sign temporary NDAs. When questioned, executives referenced legal concerns, but insiders suspected something else: fear. One seasoned cameraman reportedly refused payment and walked off set after reviewing the lagging reflection frame by frame. "That wasn't editing," he said. "Something was inside the mirror, watching him." Fans would never see a single second of the investigation. The episode was renamed, then canceled, then erased. But late that year, anonymous posts appeared on paranormal forums claiming the reflection clip still exists, stored on a drive Nick kept locked away. Because in that footage, the reflection doesn't just lag, it smiles. For years after leaving the show, Nick stayed quiet. Fans assumed he'd retired, working quietly on smaller paranormal projects. But late-night interviews and cryptic live streams revealed something darker. At first, he spoke softly about lost evidence, hinting that entire investigations were locked away by executives. Viewers thought this was standard TV politics, until Nick said producers suppressed episodes because certain hauntings didn't stay behind when the crew packed up. The paranormal community fractured instantly. Some called him bitter. Others pointed to old footage where Nick stared into empty hallways, whispering to no one. Then Nick revealed that multiple investigators developed insomnia, violent night terrors, and memory loss after lockdowns. But the network cut those scenes, calling them brand damage. In one interview, Nick claimed certain locations weren't haunted. They were hunters, waiting for someone intuitive enough to notice them. He hinted that isolation lockdowns stripped investigators emotionally. creating a doorway. He admitted he regrets agreeing to them. When pressed, Nick spoke about the mirror footage from the psychiatric annex, the episode that never aired. Editors saw his reflection lag, blinking twice when he blinked once. Nick says executives banned the footage, terrified it would encourage viewers to mimic dangerous rituals. He kept one copy. It's locked away. Nick warned fans chasing thrills through abandoned hospitals. You're not filming ghosts. You're offering something to them. He says some entities don't want fame. They want attachment. He sleeps with curtains over mirrors now, refuses solo walkthroughs, and claims he still hears tapping at night, always spelling his name. When fans ask why he really left, he doesn't mention contracts. He just says softly, "Some hauntings don't end when cameras cut." Today, Nick's message is simple. If you walk into a haunted place and feel watched, don't challenge the dark, don't joke about demons, and never investigate alone, because the most dangerous spirits don't appear on camera. They follow you home when the silence starts. Something shocking just happened. Moments ago, Zak Bagans finally broke his silence about a banned Ghost Adventures episode the network pulled off television and ordered never to be released. Fans have whispered about it for years, but until now, nobody knew why the footage vanished. Zak's statement is chilling, and the details he reveals raise terrifying questions about what the team experienced behind locked doors. This isn't about demons, scratches, or whispers anymore. It's about something that affected the crew weeks after filming, something that spread. Before we go any further, subscribe now if you love paranormal deep dives, because what follows may change how you watch Ghost Adventures forever. When the episode was first teased in early 2017, nothing seemed unusual. Ghost Adventures uploaded a 14-second trailer showing the crew entering a crumbling psychiatric hospital in rural Indiana, a building that had been shuttered since the late 90s, fenced off by the state, and rumored to trigger violent behavioral spirals in anyone who stayed overnight. The teaser racked up hundreds of thousands of views in hours. Then, suddenly, the video disappeared. Social media posts from the official Ghost Adventures accounts referencing the lockdown were quietly scrubbed. The scheduled air date vanished from network listings. At first, fans assumed a production delay, maybe a rights issue, nothing new in television. But something strange followed. Days after its removal, Zach Bagans appeared on a routine promotional livestream looking shaken, eyes sunken, voice lower than normal. Viewers commented that he blinked too slowly, as if struggling to focus. When asked about the missing episode, Zach's smile froze. His only response was a vague, "Some locations push back." Moments later, the live stream abruptly cut off. Recorded copies of that broadcast were pulled by the network almost immediately. Forums exploded. Fans cited whispers from anonymous crew members claiming the episode had aired once in a European test market at 2 in the morning, only to be pulled before U.S. distribution. A handful of viewers insisted they'd seen a figure in the background that looked exactly like Zach, standing in a hallway, watching the crew. At the same time, Zach was on camera somewhere else. Most of these claims were dismissed as fan exaggeration, until other witnesses reported similar sightings. Meanwhile, production assistants, who had been active on social media, suddenly fell silent. One posted cryptically, "There are things you don't film a second time," then deleted their account entirely. That's when investigators noticed something chilling. The building the episode was filmed in wasn't just condemned. It had been placed under a behavioral quarantine order in 1994, a legal classification used for contagious psychological phenomena. 5 employees had vanished without a trace during its final year. Access logs show no official investigation ever followed. The network refused to comment. Zach refused to elaborate, and the episode, nicknamed by fans the Duplicate Lockdown, was erased so surgically that many began to wonder if something followed the crew home. And one question simmered beneath every thread. If this wasn't paranormal, what was the network afraid the public would see? The asylum at the center of the banned episode was once known as Eastfield Behavioral Research Hospital, but that name doesn't show up anywhere online now. Every traceable document lists it simply as EBR Facility, like the state wanted to erase the branding. Construction finished. finished in 1958, built on federal funding earmarked for experimental therapeutic observation. Locals claimed it wasn't a hospital at all. It was a psychological testing site for patients reporting auditory hallucinations and visual duplication disorders. Early newspaper clippings describe patients insisting they saw copies of themselves lurking in hallways, mimicking gestures a second too late. Former employees told reporters it wasn't the patients that frightened them, it was the building. Doors that creaked open in perfect synchrony, footsteps that echoed with delayed timing, and hallways that produced whispers resembling the voices of staff. In 1994, after 5 disappearances and an internal investigation that remains sealed to this day, the state padlocked the gates. But unlike most closures, Eastfield wasn't mothballed. It was quarantined. Signs warned of behavioral contamination risk. The meaning was never explained. When Zach's research team pulled property records for filming approval, they found a handwritten note attached to one copy of the report. Do not enter East Wing after midnight. Mirrors must stay covered. No signature, no explanation. During pre-production interviews, a former nurse, face blurred, admitted staff routinely covered reflective surfaces because patients claimed their reflections made facial expressions they didn't. She described one man who refused to sleep unless mirrors were draped. Security logs show he vanished 2 days later. His bed sheets were found folded neatly, as if he'd stepped out of existence rather than walked away. The network saw this as perfect television bait until a secondary clearance request came back, stamped with an unusual warning. Record at your own liability. Extended exposure may alter perceptive interpretation. Network lawyers shrugged it off. Zach didn't. He saved a screenshot of the warning, and when the crew arrived on location, locals refused to guide them to the entrance. One old man murmured, "They closed it because the building started learning." The camera caught Zach just barely pausing when he heard that. The worst part? The door to the East Wing, supposedly sealed, was found unlocked, and something had scratched "Return the copy" across the paint. The very moment filming began, the building's behavior changed. The air inside the East Wing sat unnaturally still, like stepping into a photograph. Zach noted on camera that his voice felt denser, as if the sound absorbed rather than echoed. Behind him, Aaron joked nervously, "It's like the walls are listening." That line didn't age well. During their first walkthrough, they noticed something odd. The hallways seemed just slightly longer on camera. When Billy compared live footage to architectural blueprints, the corridor stretched an additional 6 feet that didn't exist on paper. Zach laughed it off. Buildings shift over time. But minutes later, when they retraced their steps, the hallway had shortened again, swallowing the extra distance. That's when Aaron whispered, "Did it move?" Moments later, something captured everyone's attention. In the far corner of the hall, layered beneath static, was the sound of Billy's voice, muffled, delayed, repeating what he had just said 5 seconds earlier. Jay replayed it, confused, thinking it was audio bleed. But on the second playback, the voice changed tone. Same words. Wrong emotional inflection, like a bad impression. Zach immediately ordered the team to mark timestamps. That's standard protocol. But something more troubling happened. Every time they spoke, their words began returning to them through vents and decaying door frames. Out of sync, slower, lower. It sounded less like an echo and more like someone practicing. While filming in the patient intake corridor, Aaron stopped. He stared through the doorway, eyes wide, whispering, "I just saw myself walk past that hall." They reviewed the camera feed. Nothing. But Aaron insisted he saw a figure matching his height, his jacket, his haircut, walking with its shoulders slightly slumped, head tilted downward, like someone wearing his identity uncomfortably. Zach pulled him aside, whispering so quietly the camera barely picked it up. "Don't engage if you see yourself, not the eyes." He knew. He'd heard stories about places like this. As they continued toward the East Wing, motion sensors started triggering behind them, one by one, perfectly tracking their previous footsteps with a delayed rhythm, as if something was following, just a few seconds behind, copying their path. And then Jay froze. His thermal camera picked up a human-shaped heat signature standing in the same posture as Zach. same height, same broad shoulders, except Zach was right in front of him. When they turned to face it, the figure vanished in one frame. It didn't feel like a haunting. It felt like rehearsal. Something in Eastfield wasn't trying to scare them. It was learning them. Crossing into the East Wing felt like stepping into a different building entirely. The temperature dropped almost 10 degrees on camera, yet no drafts registered. Zach noted an immediate pressure in his ears, the same sensation scuba divers feel before a plunge. Behind him, Aaron rubbed his temples and whispered, "Something's shifting in here." He wasn't wrong. The layout was impossible. A nurse's station that appeared on the blueprint was gone, replaced by a corridor of doors, each identical, each slightly ajar, each creaking open by a centimeter as the team passed. Billy swept his flashlight down the row, and every door stopped moving at once. Jay muttered, "It's observing." The mimicry escalated. When Zach asked, "Is anyone here with us?" his own voice replied from deeper within the wing, muffled and distorted. "Us here with you." Same cadence, wrong feeling. When the crew turned toward the voice, all 4 EMF meters spiked simultaneously. The cameras jittered, warping the image briefly, like the shape of a hallway bending. Jay swore the walls breathed. The footage later showed plaster dust falling as if exhaled. Then came the scratching. From behind every door, slow, measured scraping against wood, not frantic, not angry, deliberate, like something shaping fingernails, learning texture. Aaron shouted into the dark, demanding it show itself. The scratching paused. Then, from 4 doors at once, a whisper delivered in 4 slightly different tones. "Return the copy." Zach's face tightened. He knew that phrase. Patients had reported duplicates, versions of themselves standing too still, smiling too long, whispering back words a second late. The staff called it mirrored identity anxiety. The state called it containment failure. The team pressed forward into the records room. The shelves were empty except for a single file folder resting in the center of the floor, as though placed intentionally. Inside were photographs of patients staring into mirrors, their reflections slightly delayed. In some photos, the reflections smiled, while the patients did not. As the crew examined the photos, Billy heard breathing directly behind him. He spun, camera raised, but saw only his own reflection in a filthy window pane. Except it wasn't breathing in sync. Its chest rose after his. "Don't look at it," Zach snapped, dragging him away. "It wants recognition." From deeper in the East Wing, footstep echoes began returning, slower, heavier, as if matching the crew's path from minutes earlier. The building wasn't just copying voices anymore. It was practicing footsteps, learning movement, matching posture. And with every door they passed, a sliver wider, a grin in wood grain, a watching stillness whispered one truth. It wasn't hunting, it was auditioning. It happened at 2:43 a.m. The crew set a static night vision camera facing the longest hallway in the East Wing, one that staff previously described as stretching when no one's watching. Zach instructed everyone to circle back to the main lobby to regroup. As they walked away, the static cam kept recording. Nothing moved for 30 seconds. Then, footsteps. Slow, heavy, 4 pairs, though the crew were already gone. In the distance, 4 silhouettes appeared, just outlines at first, trudging toward the camera. As the figures drew closer, the night vision feed sharpened. Viewers who caught the European broadcast described the same sickening realization. They looked exactly like Zach, Aaron, Billy, and Jay, down to their clothing, posture, and height. But something was wrong. Their arms hung too loosely, their heads tipped forward, as if straining to wear faces that didn't fit. Halfway down the hall, the copy of Jay stopped moving. The others continued without him. Its body froze, perfectly still, except for its face. Slowly, the jaw unhinged farther than human anatomy allows. It released a guttural groan that wavered into static, matching the cadence of Jay's laugh from earlier in the episode, but distorted, like someone dragging a memory out of tune. Meanwhile, back with the real crew, Billy suddenly swiped the air behind him, yelling, "Who followed me?" But no one was there. Temperature dropped 5 degrees in seconds. Jay saw a shadow leaning around a corner, identical to Zach's outline, then vanishing before it could be identified. Zach hurried everyone to check the static cam. When they reviewed the footage, the copies were closer than where they had left it, only 6 feet from the lens, staring directly into the glass. Worse, One copy lacked shoes. Its bare feet left no prints. The real Zach stood silent, staring at the footage. He muttered, almost to himself, "This is why they shut it down in '94. Before they could rewind, the screen glitched. Not static, compression artifacts appearing in the shapes of familiar faces. The hallway behind the copies bent, rippled, like heat waves. Billy swore he could see the architecture bending around them, folding. And then, frame by frame, each copy's mouth formed a silent word. Soon, when the video cut back to live feed, the hallway was empty. But from behind the crew, deeper in the dark, footsteps answered. The crew retreated toward the lobby, rattled and whispering. Every footstep echoed a half-beat late, like the building was repeating their rhythm, growing more confident with each mimicry. Zach attempted to radio the static cam operator outside, but the earpiece only returned their voices, delayed, deeper, almost amused. In the lobby, Billy started rubbing his forearm compulsively. When Zach asked what was wrong, Billy stammered that his skin felt too loose, like his body wasn't fitted right. Aaron backed away, insisting that Billy's eyes looked slightly farther apart than they were earlier. The camera footage later confirmed subtle differences, millimeters, but enough to trigger primal alarm. Moments later, Jay's voice echoed from the east corridor again, repeating a sentence he had just spoken. "We have to get out now." But this time, the voice sounded excited, not afraid. The real Jay froze. "That wasn't me." Zach ordered everyone to avoid responding to anything that sounded familiar. "Identity recognition is how it spreads," he muttered, sounding like he'd read it somewhere. They pushed toward the exit, but the exit wasn't there. Instead, a new hallway had appeared, walls stretching into darkness. Zach spun, checking the map. Impossible. The building's geometry had changed. The floor plan was rewriting itself. Then came the laughter. At first, it was Aaron's cadence, short, nervous bursts. But when Aaron insisted he wasn't laughing, the sound swelled into Billy's deeper chuckle, then Jay's shaky giggle. One more voice joined, Zach's, and the room fell silent. Every crew member stared at the stairwell. In the darkness beyond the last step, 4 silhouettes stood perfectly still. No cameras pointed at them, but the crew could feel eyes scanning their bone structure, copying height ratios, memorizing posture. Slowly, the shapes leaned forward with unnatural synchronization, as though observing angles of jaw lines, rehearsing familiarity. Zach whispered, "It's learning behaviors, like a script." Suddenly the radio crackled, not static, but a perfectly whispered mimic of Zach's voice. "Stop running. Return the copy." Billy jolted, panic bursting. "Copy of what?" No answer, just breathing. Slow, delayed, wrong. The crew ran. Equipment clanged. Downed tripods scattered across tile. The building responded with shifting geometry, forcing them through rooms they'd never entered, doorways that hadn't existed minutes before. Mid-sprint, Aaron screamed and grabbed his shoulder. A hand, identical to his, had just brushed past him, but no one was behind him. When they finally reached the entrance arch, a reflection in a cracked glass panel stopped them cold. All 4 appeared in the glass, but one reflection smiled, while its real counterpart trembled. Zach smashed the glass with his flashlight. One reflection didn't shatter. It just blinked. After the glass incident, the crew sprinted toward the loading bay, their original entry point. But when they arrived, the exit door now stood closed from the outside, its handle ice cold, as if it hadn't been touched in decades. Zach slammed his shoulder into it once, twice. The third time, it budged, not from their force, but from something pulling on the other side. Everyone froze. Through the narrow gap, they saw 4 silhouettes beyond the glass, identical heights and stances, patiently waiting. One of them tilted its head, the exact angle Zach does when he questions evidence. Billy yelled, "Back!" and dragged him away. The door slammed shut, as if the building itself inhaled. The radios crackled again, this time fragmented voices, versions of their own speech patterns, sentences they'd spoken earlier in the night, stitched together like audio ransom notes. "Stay," with Us, the voices pleaded. Then, return, the copy. Then Jay suddenly collapsed, convulsing. His reflection in a nearby metal cabinet smiled calmly, eyes unblinking. For 5 seconds, Jay's vitals went flat on the IR monitor, before spiking again. When he gasped awake, his voice sounded subtly different. Vowels stretched, consonants delayed. Aaron backed away, horrified. "That's not him," Jay whispered. "It's inside." The reflection whispered back, too late. They finally escaped through a service stairwell, one Zach insisted hadn't existed on the blueprint. Outside, each member was visibly altered. Eye spacing, vocal pitch, gait cadence, all off by imperceptible but unsettling degrees. Paramedics refused to approach without masks. Network executives seized the footage on arrival. Legal teams quarantined the raw file, citing concerns about behavioral trigger contagion. Internal memos leaked weeks later. Test audiences reported phantom footstep echoes in their homes after viewing rough cuts. One viewer claimed his reflection nodded when he hadn't. Discovery demanded the episode pulled. Lawyers referenced a liability clause meant for neurological artifacts. The building was sealed permanently. Welding torches, concrete slaps, black plastic. State officials denied involvement while wearing mirrored visors. Zach went quiet for months. When he returned, sunglasses hid his eyes. Fans noticed his words occasionally lagged by a fraction of a second. Subtle, but enough to unsettle. And the question that haunted everyone who worked on the episode remained. If something learns you too well, can you be sure you're still the original? Just hours ago, Zach posted a short message to his official channel. No intro, no music, no edits. He stared into the camera longer than necessary before speaking. His voice was slow, syllables dragging like furniture on tile. "The episode wasn't pulled because it was dangerous to us," he said. "It was pulled because it might have been dangerous to you." He explained that the entity inside Eastfield doesn't haunt places. It haunts patterns, faces, voices, behaviors. "If you watch it," he whispered, "you teach it." Before ending the video, he leaned closer and whispered something almost lost to audio compression. "You may already feel it watching." The clip ended abruptly. Comments flooded with viewers claiming their reflection blinked wrong. Their footsteps echoed late, their names whispered from empty rooms. Minutes later, the video vanished, but the view count stayed frozen on. Once hailed as the fearless face of ghost hunting, Zach Bagans built an empire on ghost adventures and his infamous haunted museum. But behind the cameras and haunted artifacts, his life has unraveled in ways more chilling than any spirit he ever provoked. From bitter feuds and betrayal in the paranormal world, to health problems that left him scarred, to public scandals and heartbreak that shattered his personal life, Zach's story has turned into a haunting of its own. This is the tragic downfall of a man who spent years chasing ghosts, only to be haunted by his own reality. In the mid-2000s, Zach Bagans emerged as a bold new face in paranormal television, carrying with him an energy that was impossible to ignore. He was young, brash, and determined to turn ghost hunting into a spectacle that blended reality TV drama with genuine curiosity about the unknown. His breakout came with the independent documentary Ghost Adventures, 2004, which captured his overnight lockdowns in haunted places. This project wasn't just another amateur film. It was a gritty, eerie experience that showed Bagans daring the dead to reveal themselves. By 2007, the Sci-Fi Channel aired it nationally, giving viewers their first taste of Bagans' aggressive style. When the Ghost Adventures series premiered on the Travel Channel in 2008, it skyrocketed. Zach's imposing figure, black-clad wardrobe, and confrontational approach to the supernatural made him stand out from the cautious investigators audiences had seen before. Instead of whispering in the dark, he shouted at spirits, challenging them to manifest. His intensity, often accompanied by dramatic night vision footage of scratches, possessions, or sudden fainting, made for irresistible TV. Fans loved his fearlessness and his willingness to act as both leader and lightning rod for ghostly encounters. He became the poster child for the paranormal boom, his popularity eclipsing competitors almost overnight. By the early 2010s, Ghost Adventures was one of the most watched shows on the Travel Channel. Bagans cemented his celebrity status with his best-selling memoir Dark World and a string of specials that further expanded the Ghost Adventures brand. For viewers, Zak Bagans wasn't just investigating haunted houses, he was the haunted house. His personality became inseparable from the show's identity, fueling its rise as a cultural phenomenon. Yet, as the fame grew, so did the seeds of tension, skepticism, and personal costs that would later haunt him. By the mid-2000s teens, Zak Bagans had built an empire that stretched far beyond ghost hunting. Ghost Adventures was racking up season after season, and Bagans became more than just a host. He was the executive producer, narrator, and driving creative force. He branched into spin-offs like Aftershocks and Paranormal Challenge, each of which kept his name at the center of paranormal entertainment. For a time, it seemed like he couldn't miss. Bagans's boldest move came in 2017 with the opening of his haunted museum in Las Vegas. This wasn't just a tourist attraction. It was the ultimate expression of his fascination with cursed and haunted objects. Visitors walked through darkened hallways filled with infamous artifacts: the Dybbuk box, the Devil's Rocking Chair, Jack Kevorkian's death van, even memorabilia linked to notorious criminals. The museum became a hit, winning awards for Best Attraction and drawing both fans and skeptics. Celebrities like Post Malone stopped by, with some claiming to suffer strange misfortunes afterward. Bagans reveled in the notoriety, seeing the museum as both a passion project and a permanent legacy. Professionally, Bagans seemed untouchable. He published Ghost Hunting for Dummies in 2019, partnered with filmmaker Eli Roth for the Haunted Museum anthology, and continued his music and writing projects. In Las Vegas, he was treated as both an eccentric showman and a cultural figure who had successfully turned the supernatural into business. At this peak, Zach Baggins wasn't just the face of ghost hunting on TV, he was the industry. But the higher he climbed, the greater the cracks began to show. Colleagues whispered about his ego, skeptics accused him of fakery, and soon controversies began to gnaw at the carefully built empire. The same traits that fueled Zach Bagans' meteoric rise, his intensity, his theatrics, his hunger for control, also began to erode his reputation. Skeptics were some of his earliest and loudest critics, pointing to episodes where evidence seemed staged or exaggerated. Former crew members even alleged that scenes were reshot or manipulated to create drama, with Bagans himself accused of overacting possessions and attacks. While fans accepted some theatrics as part of the show's entertainment, critics argued that Bagans blurred the line between genuine investigation and performance. The credibility that had once set Ghost Adventures apart was now being questioned. But the most damaging blows came from within the paranormal community itself. When co-creator Nick Groff abruptly left Ghost Adventures in 2014, rumors swirled about creative clashes with Bagans. Fans noted that Groff had been sidelined in later seasons, while Bagans increasingly dominated the screen. Years later, Groff hinted at disagreements over the show's direction, particularly its obsession with demonic storylines, and suggested that Bagans' ego had grown too large. By 2023, the feud spilled into the open when Groff claimed he had been blacklisted from networks due to TV politics. Other investigators accused Bagans of pressuring executives to cancel rival shows, painting him as a gatekeeper who used his clout to shut others out. Online, fans who once adored him began to sour, with some saying the show had lost its authenticity and fallen victim to Bagans' arrogance. His haunted museum, too, was under fire. Skeptical researchers debunked the provenance of key artifacts like the Dybbuk box, exposing them as modern hoaxes. Even his books weren't immune. Critics discovered plagiarized passages, forcing Bagans to settle the matter quietly. By this point, the image of Zach Bagans as a fearless ghost hunter was cracking. replaced by whispers of a man more interested in control, profit, and theatrics than truth. For all his bravado on screen, Zak Bagans has admitted that chasing ghosts has left lasting scars on his body and mind. Perhaps the most infamous example came from his 2018 documentary Demon House, where he investigated what was dubbed the most haunted house in America, in Gary, Indiana. After weeks of filming violent possessions, terrifying encounters, and what he described as dark forces, Bagans had the house demolished. But the demons, he said, didn't leave with it. Not long after, Bagans developed diplopia, permanent double vision, that forced him to wear prism glasses for the rest of his life. For a man who built his brand on his piercing stare, the condition was a cruel twist, one he himself blamed on the house. And that wasn't the only toll. During a Halloween special in 2019, at the Parent farmhouse, the inspiration for The Conjuring, Bagans fell violently ill. He later described panic attacks, dizziness, and weeks of feeling as if something was drawing the life out of me. Over the years, he has often told stories of fainting, sudden illnesses, or mood swings after certain investigations. While skeptics dismiss these as theatrics, Bagans insists the dark energies he confronts have real consequences. He's described paranormal work as a kind of Russian roulette. Every location potentially dangerous. Every investigation another risk of inviting something into his body or mind. The tragedy here is layered. On the surface, Bagans' ailments lend authenticity to his claims. He has paid a personal price in pursuit of evidence. But, on a deeper level, they represent a haunting that never ends. Unlike an episode that can be neatly edited for television, his health issues are permanent, invisible demons. Bagans once seemed untouchable, the fearless leader who provoked spirits without fear. Today, fans see a man who carries those spirits inside him, in scars he can't shake off. If Zak Bagans' health struggles revealed the toll of ghost hunting, the tragedies among his closest colleagues showed that the real dangers sometimes come from people, not spirits. One of the earliest and darkest moments came in 2015, when frequent Ghost Adventures guests Mark and Debbie Constantino were found dead in a shocking murder-suicide. Mark killed Debbie after years of reported abuse, then turned the gun on himself. For Bagans and his crew, who had filmed with the Constantinos many times, the event was devastating. It added a chilling shadow over the Ghost Adventures family, one that fans often describe as the first sign of a curse following those tied to the show. But the heartbreak didn't end there. In early 2025, Bagans' closest teammate, Aaron Goodwin, faced an ordeal that seemed ripped from a horror movie. Aaron's wife, Victoria, was arrested in Las Vegas for plotting to hire a hitman. Her target, horrifyingly, was Aaron himself. The murder-for-hire scheme collapsed when the supposed assassin turned out to be an undercover officer. But the revelation left Aaron shaken and betrayed. He called it the most emotionally trying time of my life. The story rocked the fan base. After decades of watching Aaron and Zach side by side in haunted basements and asylums, viewers were stunned to see Aaron's real-life horror eclipse anything on the show. For Bagans, watching his longtime friend endure this ordeal added another tragic chapter. The crew paused filming, and though Aaron survived, the betrayal left scars no exorcism could cure. Bagans himself did not speak much about it publicly, but the silence said plenty. After years of facing the dead, the living had proven to be more dangerous, and the idea that even the Ghost Adventures family could fracture under such darkness left fans wondering how much more tragedy Bagans could shoulder. While health scares and crew tragedies painted one side of Zak Bagans' decline, the collapse of his personal reputation came from another: scandal. For years, Bagans kept his private life relatively low profile, but his 6-year relationship with model and former Girls Next Door star Holly Madison brought him into a brighter spotlight. At first, the pairing seemed stable. Two reality TV veterans, both Las Vegas personalities, finding common ground. But in 2021, cracks appeared as reports of on-and-off breakups surfaced. By early 2025, the couple called it quits for good. Then came the explosion. Madison took to her podcast and social media, unleashing a storm of accusations that Zach Bagans had cheated on her with at least 7 different women. She posted cryptic messages and receipts, updating the tally as more stories poured in. Fans watched in disbelief as Madison publicly dismantled their relationship, branding Bagans a serial cheater who had humiliated her for years. The drama dominated tabloids, and for Bagans, who built his brand on being serious, stoic, and commanding, the image of a man caught in messy infidelity was a devastating blow. This scandal arrived at a time when Bagans was already under fire for alleged plagiarism in his books, for feuds with former co-star Nick Groff, and for accusations that he used his clout to cancel rival shows. Together, it painted a picture of a man whose empire was cracking from every angle, accused of being dishonest in work, accused of betrayal in love, and accused of arrogance in business. By 2025, his once devoted fan base was divided. Some still stood by him, pointing to decades of entertainment and achievement. But others saw a tragic figure, a ghost hunter who had become haunted by his own decisions. By the mid-2020s, Zak Bagans was no longer the fresh face of paranormal TV. He had become its most polarizing figure. In the early years, fans saw him as fearless, willing to scream into the dark and confront anything that moved. But over time, even loyal viewers began to question whether the theatrics had gone too far. On forums and social media, longtime supporters lamented that Ghost Adventures had turned into a cycle of recycled plots. Every spirit was a demon, every bump in the dark exaggerated. What once felt raw and groundbreaking now looked scripted and formulaic. But the deeper fractures came within the paranormal community itself. Bagans' falling out with Nick Groff became a defining saga. Groff's later accusations of being blacklisted from networks by TV politics gave voice to what many suspected, that Zach was pulling strings behind the scenes to protect his empire. Other investigators, like Bill Hartley, added fuel by accusing him of gangster tactics, telling executives to choose between him or other shows. Whether true or not, the perception stuck. Bagans became seen not just as a star, but as a gatekeeper. For some, he was no longer the bold ghost hunter who opened doors, but the one who slammed them shut. This perception poisoned the community. Up-and-coming investigators on YouTube or small cable shows often avoided mentioning him, wary of the shadow he cast. Others openly mocked his style, positioning themselves as the anti-Bagan, more serious, less sensational. By 2025, Bagan's reputation had fractured, beloved by die-hard fans, reviled by skeptics, and treated with suspicion by many peers. It was a tragic shift for a man who once symbolized unity in the paranormal world, now standing as a controversial figure surrounded by whispers of ego and control. As his controversies multiplied, another element crept into Zak Bagans' life, an unmistakable sense of isolation. Fame had elevated him to the top of paranormal entertainment, but it had also walled him off. His haunted museum, though thriving, became almost a fortress, where fans lined up outside, but few truly knew the man behind the glass cases. Reports from former staff painted him as a difficult boss, obsessed with rules and his own image. While unverified, such stories only fed the image of Bagans as a recluse, surrounded by artifacts rather than people. His personal relationships reinforced this impression. The collapse of his romance with Holly Madison wasn't just tabloid fodder. It symbolized how, even in love, Bagans' life seemed haunted. Madison's accusations of betrayal left him silent, unwilling to defend himself publicly. That silence itself became a statement, one that made him appear cornered. A man who once commanded spirits, now unable to command his own narrative. Add to this the tragedies of his colleagues, the Constantino murder-suicide, Aaron Goodwin's betrayal by his wife, and Bagans appeared increasingly cursed by proximity to chaos. Behind the fame, the wealth, and the museum tours, what emerged was a portrait of loneliness. Bagans had built his world around ghosts, and now, fittingly, he lived like one. Admired from a distance, whispered about in scandal, rarely connected on a human level. In interviews, his once fiery energy had mellowed into something quieter, even defensive. The fearless investigator now sounded weary, as if decades of chasing shadows had left him with too many of his own. Looking at Zak Bagans in 2025, the picture is complicated and undeniably tragic. He still commands a loyal audience. Ghost Adventures has reached an astonishing 28 seasons, and his haunted museum remains one of Las Vegas's strangest attractions. Yet his influence no longer feels triumphant. It feels haunted, marked by controversy, loss, and decline. Once celebrated as a pioneer, he now exists in a fractured legacy, adored by some, dismissed by others, and questioned by many. For critics, his downfall is simple. Ego and sensationalism caught up with him. They point to accusations of fakery, feuds with colleagues, and scandals in his personal life as proof that Bagans became a character of his own creation, more showman than seeker of truth. For fans, the tragedy lies in watching a man who gave everything to the paranormal world now suffer under the weight of health problems, heartbreak, and betrayal. Either way, his story is no longer just about ghosts. It's about what happens when chasing the supernatural consumes the natural life you have. Zach Bagans once told an interviewer, "You can't look into the dark without it looking back at you." Today, those words feel like prophecy. He stared into the darkness for decades, daring it to reveal itself. And now, at his current age, the darkness stares back, not as a spirit in the shadows, but as the tragedies, scandals, and losses that haunt his every step. His legacy is not just one of ghost hunting, but of a man who became haunted himself.